Welcome, I'm Aubrey Reeves, CEO of Business and Arts. Before we begin, I'd first like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm a settler speaking to you from Toronto. Business and Arts is a national organization with staff in many different territories, but I have the honor to be a guest on the traditional lands and waters of the Petun and Wendat people, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee Confederacies, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River, as well as many other Indigenous nations, some of whose names are no longer remembered. We acknowledge all who came before us and have traveled the lands and waters of this territory. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work, to live, and to meet on these lands. Today, we're kicking off the 2025 speaker series with a case study in collaboration. We're digging into the 3-year creative collaborative initiative, which unites Soulpepper Theatre, Obsidian Theatre, the Musical Stage Company, Bad Hats Theatre, and the Toronto Fringe Festival. We'll learn about how they've come together and what they hope to achieve. We have representatives from 3 out of 5 of those companies here with us today. A big thank you to the speaker series presenting partner, Power Corporation of Canada, whose support enables us to bring these kind of inspiring discussions to you. We're grateful for Power Corporation's continued support. Okay, a few housekeeping items. We're happy to have ASL interpretation for today's session, and we also have auto-generated English and French captions that can be turned on in your control panel. Only the presenters and moderators will have our microphones on today, so please submit your questions in the Q&A box. The session is scheduled for 1 hour. And finally, I'd like to share that just a little earlier today, Business and Arts opened applications for the Arts Fest regional programs in 4 locations. This program offers sponsorship training to help organizations build stronger partnerships with the corporate sector and local businesses. We're excited to return to Alberta and Saskatchewan in 2025, and we're thrilled to announce that we are launching the program in Winnipeg and Greater Sudbury. If you're based in any of those 4 regions, we encourage you to check out the call on our website. Now, let me introduce our panelists, Gideon Arthurs, Michael Sinclair, and Paul Beauchamp. Gideon is the Executive Director of Soulpepper Theatre Company and the Young Centre for the Performing Arts. Previously, he was the CEO of the National Theatre School of Canada for 8 years, where he implemented initiatives that increased diversity and inclusivity. This includes saving the Sears Drama Festival from closure and launching artist residencies for Indigenous and emerging cultural leaders. He also led several major projects as General Manager of Toronto's Tarragon Theatre and as Executive Director of the Toronto Fringe Festival. Gideon has served on many boards and committees and is currently the chair of the board for Sankofa Square and vice chair of the Toronto Alliance for the Performing Arts. Among many other volunteer opportunities, he served on the board of the Conseil des Arts de Montréal and is recipient of the Prix Mosaic for his work on inclusion. Michael Sinclair is the general manager of Obsidian Theatre Company, Canada's largest culturally specific theatre company. Prior to assuming the position at Obsidian, Michael was very active in the theatre community as a professional stage manager for over 20 years, which took him from coast to coast with many stops in between and even to Barbados. In that time, he's worked in commercial, festival, large regional and local theatres, touring regionally, nationally, and internationally, but working mainly in the Toronto area. A Concordia University grad in accounting, Michael has worked for a chartered accounting firm, a firm of investment managers, and private industry before branching out into his career in theatre. He's currently on the board of Stage Management for the Arts and Toronto Arts Council and TAPA. And finally, Paul Beauchamp is the co-executive director of the Musical Stage Company. He's a graduate from the Toronto Metropolitan University's Performing Production Program, and he began his career stage managing with Mirvish Productions, Luminato, Tarragon Theatre, Soulpepper, and the Musical Stage Company for the 2012 production of Caroline or Change. Paul also produced multiple award-winning international productions for the Luminato Festival over 6 seasons with the organization. And for 5 years, he acted as the inaugural general manager for the barriers-free arts education organization, the Artist Mentoring Youth Project, also known as the AMY Project. He currently serves as managing producer for Vita Brevis Arts, which is the artistic engine behind the ambitious Fall on Your Knees theatrical adaptation that toured Eastern Canada in early 2023. And finally, he also sits on the board of the Prime Movers Theatre Company and Vita Brevis Arts. So welcome all 3 of you. So we're going to get started with Gideon telling us about the 2024 to 27 transformation plan, stories for a stronger city, and how this collaboration fits into that overall plan.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here. It's amazing to see many familiar names in the chat. It's awesome. I'll just give a very brief overview of the overall plan because this is sort of one of the most important components of what Soulpepper is working on right now. But I'm imagining that a lot of what I would describe is what you're all facing in your day-to-day in terms of trying to reimagine how our sector can become more sustainable, how we can all find new ways of working given the enormous and incredibly complex challenges that we're facing. And Soulpepper is, of course, not immune from any of those things. We had back-to-back major crises in 2018 with our leadership transition, and then in 2020 with the pandemic. And, you know, I often say that any one of those two things could have shut down a company, and together they were really, really complex to navigate. But we found ourselves in 2022 with a huge amount of opportunity ahead of us, but also the challenge of making a 50,000 square foot facility in downtown Toronto that costs a huge amount of money to run be functional and sustainable over the long term. And that was especially, as many of you experienced, when what you might call a core audience had stepped away from the organization for lots of different reasons. And so with my artistic partner, Weenie, we had a very deep discussion about how a company might become sustainable by really thinking about its fundamental purpose in community. And we came up with this plan, Stories for a Stronger City, that has two pillars, really. The first was about recognizing that a place like ours was a huge privilege to have, this amazing facility that we have with multiple performance spaces and creation spaces, but it was also a huge risk and liability for us alone to carry it. I don't mind being transparent. It costs us about $1.5 million to open the doors every year. And we only have, our largest theater is only 300 seats. So the math isn't that hard to figure out in terms of how much theater you have to put on to pay the rent. So the first pillar of our plan is really about driving as much activity into the building as possible on an artistic level. We want to be a place where audiences can go any day of the week, any month, any time of year to see something extraordinary. And so the first goal for us is to drive the number of performances in the venue from about 200, which is where we were at in 2023, all the way up to 450 performances a year by 2026. And we'll talk about how this partnership is a huge piece of that. And that would be the kind of level of activity artistically in our building that would make sense for all of the space that we carry. The second piece is about thinking about our social impact and thinking about how to build a bigger and broader base of support. We were a company that relied heavily on donors and supporters of a certain kind. Looking at our social impact, and one of the things we know is that Toronto is becoming an increasingly unlivable city. And we thought one way of convincing people that a place like ours should exist and be supported and funded and generate revenues was to be an essential piece of the social fabric. And so we are launching a slew of new programs dedicated to fighting the loneliness epidemic in Toronto. And so that means activity all through the day, free programming, movie nights, Santa Claus in our lobby, anything that brings people out of their condos and into human contact with each other. So the CCI is a huge component of this work, and I'll stop there so we can keep going.
Yeah, okay, great. So let's dig into the actual partnership, and can we describe a little bit of how it came together and what exactly is it?
So the CCI is is kind of like a best friends agreement between some really extraordinary companies. And we, not represented on this call today, of course, are Bad Hats, who creates amazing work focused on family audiences, and the Fringe Festival that everybody knows and loves, and we're delighted to have as part of this this kind of consortium or group that we have developed. It's a 3-year pilot project to see how we can work together to build new audiences, support each other's ambitions, and kind of get past the silos of what it used to mean to be competitors. And really, the sort of front end of the conversation is about shows we can do together. But the back end of the conversation is really about what capacity, what expertise, what sort of gifts do we have to offer each other over the course of this 3 years that will move all of the companies together. So instead of an idea of a merger or some kind of governance connection, it's really a circle of people who are invested in each other's outcomes. And I think we'll get into the details of it, but each of the companies has a sort of adjacent but non-competitive mission. And we're really working on floating all boats.
Yeah, wonderful. So you still retain your individual identity, but are really closely tied together. So Michael and Paul, can you tell us a little bit about why you thought this was a good idea of teaming up with each other and with Soulpepper and these other companies, or what kind of problem were you trying to solve?
You want to go, Paul?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Aubrey. Yeah, the why and the problem are sort of intertwined for us. Essentially, the CCI really kind of cuts through the quote unquote red tape of sorting through the who and the how of co-producing. And I can detail this out a little bit, but Musical Stage Company is a musical theater organization. We're dedicated to that art form. And musical theater is an incredibly expensive art form. So we're only really able to greenlight productions of scale, new work development, and some co-commissions if we have a co-developer, a co-producer, or a co-commissioner on board. So we're constantly looking for collaborators. And the CCI really gives Musical Stage kind of a direct line of communication to like-minded organizations. And so co-producing is really sort of a big part of the why and a big part of the problem that we were trying to solve. But I think there's also sort of one more level of nuance for us here, where we're an organization that holds new work development at the center of what we do. And it takes a significant amount of resource to commission a new work, to develop it, and then to bring it to the stage. And we've found that since the pandemic, there is a greater likelihood of getting a commission to the premiere stage and on the stage if we have a collaborator who's come on board from the very beginning and co-commissioned with us. And so we saw an opportunity in the CCI to sort of find those collaborators really early on. And the Soulpepper piece was also really attractive because within the CCI with Soulpepper, we have the ability to tap into an organization that needs space filled and has the resources to co-produce a musical with us. So really it's really about collaboration. It's about those partnerships, and it's about sort of co-producing, co-commissioning, and co-developing.
And Michael, from your perspective?
Yes, when Winnie and Gideon approached us, and we started talking, we saw this as a sort of win-win type situation for Obsidian in the sense that, as Paul mentioned, it's like we are another one of those nomadic theater companies. It was like we're non-venued, so it gave us an opportunity to establish a base that our subscribers or our customers that support us on a regular basis knew that, oh, we'll be doing at least one show at Soulpepper, and look forward to, approaching the venue and saying, yeah, this is where Obsidian has a base. We will still be working out of other theater companies. We don't lose that independence, but it has allowed us an opportunity to give us a little bit more stability. And as Paul mentioned, it was like co-production is something that a lot of theater companies view as necessary coming out of the pandemic. Nobody is willing to shoulder that risk per se. But this it feels more than a co-production. It doesn't have this sort of cut and dry, on a piece of paper. This feels like we can collaborate with various departments within Soulpepper, with Bad Hats, with Musical Stage, and the Fringe. Like we can call each other up and, know that there's a door open because we're all working for the same goal. So this to us felt like a win-win type situation. We maintain our branding. We maintain, what Obsidian stands for and who we are. But we also have the support of, you know, four other mega powerhouses within the industry. And it would be stupid to sort of turn our back on something like that.
Okay. Let's get into some specific examples of how you're actually doing the logistics of this collaboration. So where are you collaborating? Why certain areas? Why not others? Like really, how are you doing it?
Yeah, there's a few projects we can point to that are already really in motion. And again, the first steps of the agreement are going to be, co-production agreements. But right now, for example, along with three other companies, Musical Stage and Soulpepper, along with TO Live and Crows, are producing the Toronto premiere of Strange Loop. This is a show that we could never have imagined doing on our own. It was a show that Musical Stage wanted to bring forward and that we all fell in love with, but there was no scenario where we could run in a 300-seat theater a show of that scope and scale and requiring that kind of intensive investment in the artistic process to bring it to stage. So, those are the first round of conversations is what can we do together that's impossible to do alone? And we've got a co-production opening in 2 weeks with Obsidian for Table for Two. But I think what's more interesting, and I'll leave for my colleagues to talk about, are the ways that we're intersecting behind the scenes, the ways that we are concretely sort of developing plans together to support a kind of a longer arc of health for our companies.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit here. I think that sort of the operationalization of these projects, it's not unlike co-producing, but I think that the major difference that I think Gideon is alluding to a little bit is this feels a little, which I think is the most important piece to me of this relationship with with the five companies, is that it's a strategic relationship. It feels like a brain trust of some of the most strategic thinkers. Like it's a group. I have a group of four other groups of collaborators that we can come into a Zoom room and bash out whatever problem that our particular organization is facing or their organization is facing. So I think it's all about collaboration, really.
Yeah, it was like, as Gideon mentioned, Table for Two hits the stage on the 7th of next month and open on the 14th. But it's like we have done shows with Soulpepper in the past. Like recently we did Three Sisters, which is a show, although Obsidian could possibly have done it on our own, it would be the only show that we would do that year. But in the co-producing collaborative manner that we did with Soulpepper, we were able to do other programming. So it's not just sort of, okay, you see Obsidian now in March and you don't see them for another 12 months. So all of this is, helpful for us as, being able to, and we work with the various departments, like, we'll have a, strategic session with the marketing department, the producing department, more than you would in a co-production model. It was like you're we feel much more comfortable bringing stuff to the table and sharing with each other than if we were just co-producers, because there's a competitive nature in the industry. You would be a little bit more reticent about divulging some of the things that you do and why you do them. But now we're working for a bigger share of the audience, and between both companies to sort of bring in new people. Like there's some of the people watching Soulpepper shows, it was like, I've never seen an Obsidian show before. And this was evident, like, we do curtain speeches and we'd say, is this your first time in seeing an Obsidian show? And, it was like there were a lot of hands that went up. But maybe they will come back and see an Obsidian show going forward. So yes, it's a way for us to expand our audience space.
I just add a little one other great example for us that is important, and it will play out differently depending on the company. But we all know there's so much behind the scenes work that happens in the artisans who work on getting a show to stage. A great example for us is that we have some of the most talented artisans in our prop shop and our building, where we build sets, our painters, our scenic painters. And the volume of work that Soulpepper was putting out on our own meant that we were constantly underusing that resource, and at the risk of even eventually losing it. People of that caliber don't want to stick around for weeks on end when there's nothing to do. And so even exploring all the way through the organization, the capacity that each of us have and the need we have to feed our artisans together is incredibly meaningful for us. We've probably tripled the amount of work happening in our shops because of the relationship with these other companies. And as a result, we've retained incredibly talented staff who have been here for 20 years.
That's really exciting. I think you've both answered my next question, which was about how staff are collaborating, and clearly artisans are collaborating, but also, yeah, you said marketing people are coming together. It strikes me also that it just helps combat some of that loneliness that, you can come together as peer marketing people and talk through the challenges that you didn't have anybody else in your small, medium-sized organization to talk those things through. So that's wonderful. So it seems to me that you're probably also saving some money and resources in this process. How are you seeing both savings and also maybe increased impacts or reach?
I think one neat thing that I've noticed from the musical stage side is we don't always need to take the lead in every single department on every single project. So that sort of, that saves capacity, that certainly saves a little bit of money, and it allows our focus to drift elsewhere. Musical stage pre-CCI, we would sort of initiate a project and we'd court co-producers, we'd strike up a co-production agreement, and then we would lead in most departments, whether it's artistic, production, marketing. And that sort of led to some burnout of staff at times, but we certainly couldn't operationalize any sort of other significant piece of art at that time because our small staff was sort of, their full attention was on the project at the time. So what the CCI has allowed is we can kind of, we can figure out which organization is going to take the lead in which areas. So Strange Loop is a really great example where this is a project that Gideon alluded to, Musical Stage came forward with and initiated. And we took the lead on figuring out all of the strategy, the sort of big picture strategy on how this was going to work. We created the first budgets, the first kind of schedules, the marketing plan, all that kind of thing, got the rights. And then once Soulpepper was on board, we handed the project over to Soulpepper to really operationalize and to lead in all of the various departments. And so that allowed Musical Stage for the first time to work on a brand new world premiere with Tarragon at the exact same time, which we were never able to do before. So that's one area that was sort of really exciting to us.
Yeah, I think we have a more is more mentality. There are definitely cost savings, but we know, splitting risk and splitting costs on a show is just a really good thing to do. I mean, in the end, you also split the revenue, so it sort of balances out. But we've seen a lot of evidence that more means more investment in marketing between two companies, alignment of messaging means more response from audience. We're not in a formal partnership, but with Crows, We just remounted their production of Master Plan, and for both companies, it was one of our best-selling shows ever because of the reach of our marketing together was so much better than the reach of our marketing apart. Another example for me, really beloved for me, is the Toronto Fringe Festival, and the prospect of having tens of thousands of young and very, very curious arts interested people is only ever going to benefit Soulpepper, because it's an amazing pipeline in terms of future audiences. And we hope to offer a kind of permanence and capacity for them to expand a footprint into the distillery district and create much more interaction with passing by audiences that wouldn't be possible if they had to do it at the 27 locations that the Fringe is being split out to. And then, I think as well for me, the truth is that audiences today are more agnostic, both company-wise and genre-wise, than they used to be. We all used to have our narrow lanes, our core supporters. And actually, I think nowadays, certainly at Soulpepper, our audience has changed completely since the pandemic, and they don't really know the difference between a musical stage, a new Canadian work, an Obsidian of Soulpepper. What they want to know is that there's something exciting happening somewhere nearby that they can be part of. And so that's the kind of generative message that we're doing. And for me, if somebody comes and sees an Obsidian show and then doesn't know about Soulpepper but wants to come back to that building because they had a memorable experience, then that's a total win. And it doesn't matter that they knew or didn't know that Soulpepper was involved.
And one of the things that, we should recognize is that each of the companies bring a different aspect to the organization. We're bringing the black background. Musical Stage is bringing the musical background. The Fringe is bringing the festival, and then Bad Hats is bringing the TYA audience. So it's like our thinking is different because we're programming for different audiences and trying to meet that. Now we're under one umbrella and we're sort of sharing this knowledge. So, it was like, it's a situation where all of us are benefiting. We're looking at coming at situations from a totally different approach than we were before. So, as I say, it's something that the signs are there that it's going to be a very positive move for all companies involved.
Mm-hmm. I would think most people would see it as a very positive move. I'm curious how funders, sponsors, and donors have reacted to this approach.
Sorry,
Go
go ahead, Michael.
No, it was still early to a certain extent. We haven't had any, at least from an Obsidian point of view, there's been no sort of negative reaction to us. It was like, I think a lot of people have said, oh, that sounds very good. They're very encouraging, to sort of see, okay, here's a sense of, a couple of people getting together and collaborating, trying to get the best for each organization. So the feedback so far has been positive. There's been no sort of pushback from any of the funders. And I know based on our early negotiations and talks that our boards are firmly behind us as well. So.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add, sort of ditto to what Michael said. I think our core, our base is really used to Musical Stage being an incredibly entrepreneurial organization. We're always working in different ways with different partners. So this didn't feel like it was coming out of left field. And I think there was some questions early on around, is this a merger or what is this thing? And once we were able to very clearly articulate what this was, and once our stakeholders understood that we were able to retain our full identity, our full brand, that we were still operating in the same way, that we could still partner with organizations outside of the CCI, everybody was really excited.
Yeah, and I think that there's two other elements to this. There's sort of the there's the insider club and the outsider club. And I think that one of the worries that the insider club, which can sometimes include funders or longtime donors with really fixed affiliations in terms of the companies that they like to support, I think that the anxiety was, are you going to lose some of your identity in the mix? Is there something that when you put on a show, which is not going to feel like a Soulpepper or an Obsidian show anymore? And the more that we talked about what it's allowing us to do instead of what it's preventing us from doing, the more people came on board. Again, in terms of the outsider club, I don't think I have to remind anybody who would be interested in this conversation that the arts receive some of the smallest percentage of philanthropic giving of any cause in Canada currently. Under 5% of donations go to the arts in Canada. And so, in my mind, there's 95% of the dollars are somewhere else, and they don't care what our individual companies' long-term identity or trademark stagecraft is. What they want to see is an organization that a lot of people care about and that's making difference in their community. And I think we do that way better together by bringing together lots of communities, making people come out of their condos, look each other in the eye. We're fighting radicalism. We're building empathy. All the things that we know that arts do intrinsically are helped by doing it more. And it opens us up to conversations with funders, donors, supporters who maybe would never have had a relationship with our companies based on a production that they may or may not be interested in.
I'm seeing tons of questions coming in from the audience. People are really interested. I'm just going to jump to our last one, which is really, what do you hope this partnership will result in after 3 years?
3 more years.
3 more years. Okay.
I'm not sure I could tolerate him for 3 more years. No, it's just like, I think this is going to be groundbreaking. It's going to give other organizations, something to sort of say, oh, that model worked very well for these guys. It was like, is there any possibility of us, trying to find partnerships with other people to create something like this? Admittedly, we're doing this as a unit, but we are still maintaining our independence. It was like one of my board's biggest concerns is, as Gideon mentioned, it was like Obsidian doesn't lose its branding or its individuality. It was like we got to where we are 25 years later by doing what we do. And we don't see this as at risk by partnering with Musical Stage. We've co-produced with Musical Stage. We've co-produced with Soulpepper. We haven't co-produced with Bad Hats yet or done anything with the Fringe, but it was like, if we can do this on a regular basis, why not try and do this in an augmented version that, a lot of the companies can share more in resources, as you say, the various departments that work together. It was like Obsidian, we're a 4-man operation. The 4 men we have fit in one of Soulpepper's offices, but it was like, so we can rely on some of their resources to help build us to a Soulpepper size.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all of this whole thing is about collaboration. So I think sort of increased development opportunities for new Canadian musicals and musical theater artists in this country across multiple stages. And it feels a little bit like we're going to develop a shorthand throughout our time with these 5 organizations, which is going to turn into efficiencies and new ways to work and just sort of like streamlining what that co-production model and collaboration model looks like. And so I'm excited to see where we find those efficiencies that we can sort of share with a broader network and the broader sector at the conclusion of the first 3 years.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to some questions from the audience now. We have a couple here that are quite similar, referring to the CCI as a best friends agreement, and they understand the advantages and the appeal of working together without restructuring or reworking governance. But a couple people are really asking about, are there terms of reference for these partnerships? What form of agreements were set in place? And that it might help others to propose this kind of relationship in their communities if they had examples of those kind of foundational documents.
Yeah, there's no deeply complex, so we have an MOU, and the MOU is between Soulpepper and each individual company, because the nature of the relationship with each company is a little bit different. Our relationship with the Fringe Festival is going to be different, because it's about hosting the Fringe within and trying to build out this extended programming versus the promise of doing a production together every year. Or in the case of Bad Hats, we had a long-standing company in residence model that was already working with them. So it's a tiny bit personalized per company, Soulpepper and that company. But what the MOU, we danced with more governance. We danced with rules and regulations, with complex offboarding processes. And I think where we landed, and I love this part of the conversation, was it just has to stay simple. It says, we love you very much. I mean, I'm not kidding. It kind of is almost in this language. It says, we love you very much. We are devoted to being successful together. We commit to doing one thing a year together unless it's just not possible. And we're going to talk about it on an ongoing basis to make sure that that collaboration is working. And here are some things that we might look at in the future. Like, one discussion we're going to have is about the back end of our box office and data sharing, and how do we build better portraits of our audiences from a demographics point of view. But there's no guarantees that we do that. And I think that's the really important part of the MOU, is that it is a declaration of affection and desire for mutual success, but not some kind of binding thing. It says you can go out and work with any other company. You don't have to seek permission from any other member of the CCI. You are you, we are we, and let's see if we can make something work.
Does it, because we've had a couple questions about this, does it specify how you split revenues or how you split costs? And then how also do you report that to your funders?
I'll just very quickly answer that. Any agreement that we enter into around a project, that's the rules of that project. So there will be co-pros, and that always supersedes the memorandum of understanding. So if it's a 50-50 co-pro, if it's a 70-30, if it's a free rent presentation, each of those is negotiated on a project by project basis, and doesn't break the mold in terms of any of our reporting.
Right. So Strange Loop, for example, Musical Stage and Soulpepper have a completely different agreement for that co-production that has nothing really to do with the MOU.
And there is something built into the MOU that says that we will look at the MOU at a certain date to see what's working and what's not working. So there's that flexibility within the overall agreement.
That's good. Do you have any actual shared administrative services or administrative roles within these agreements?
No, I mean, the piece that I think there's sort of where there's opportunity is, there's 4 organizations within the CCI that are not as big as one of the others, and I'm specifically talking about sort of the director of production department in the sort of production world. And for anyone who produces indie theater, we know that it's impossible to find production and technical personnel in the city to sort of run that side of a project, because they're all either employed full-time by institutions or their plates are just too full with other projects. So what the CCI gives us is the ability to, if we're working alongside Soulpepper to just sort of like outsource that to Soulpepper's production department. But B, there is an opportunity for the 4 other organizations to come together and say, hey, if we're not working for Soulpepper, is there a world in which we would hire one production manager that sort of production managers all of our shows that have nothing to do with Soulpepper? You know, so we haven't struck any of those deals yet. It's only sort of a couple months into the CCI, but those are sort of the opportunities that I'm looking for.
So the potential is there, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Great. This one person wants to know if you've actually had any financial support for CCI as a whole.
Not, I mean, it is specified in the, or it's kind of, yeah, in the MOU, basically everybody's money is their own money. And so I think that, you know, for Soulpepper, it is a part of the case for support for our new strategic plan. If any money intersects directly with a project that relies on another partner, that split is negotiated through that agreement. So through the agreement of a co-production, again, Strange Loop is a great example. We've clarified what happens if one company gets a sponsor for this show and how does that affect the bottom line of the show. I have to say that in conversations we've had with donors, the idea that we are driving activity into our space, that we are supporting companies that don't have facilities has been a really compelling argument.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're not going out specifically fundraising for CCI as a whole. Okay, there's so many questions coming in. What is your vision for approaching a collective marketing strategy for each of these shows across organizations?
It just depends on the show. Like, I know that with Three Sisters, we developed a lot of ancillary activities around the show. Like we had an African market in the lobby of Soulpepper to bring people in to see that there was not just Three Sisters going on, but there were other shows in the building. And it was an opportunity to bring them into the Young Center, which mightn't have happened before. But it's like, so we're doing stuff like that. I don't think Soulpepper had tried that sort of model, but you know, it was like we will each bring something into the organization, like as far as our different approach to marketing, because you know we're going after a specific audience. We're doing like blackout nights to sort of you know, encourage just the Black population to come and feel comfortable in the venue. We don't do it on every show. It depends on the show and the situation, but it's something that may not, because we're not doing it on this show, it's not something that, you know, for other reasons, but we will always be doing that because we encourage our Black audience to come and feel totally comfortable. And, you know, this show is for you.
Yeah, on a related marketing question, what platforms are you using to support the marketing together? And have you been able to integrate your various customer information and data in a manner that everyone feels is fair and safe and secure?
I'm going to add to that question a little bit because we can talk about the back end of that in a second. But the other really important piece of this is the difference between marketing a show and showing strength and health and innovation sort of in a broader brand sense. And the value, I can speak for us because we deeply value each of the 4 other companies in this agreement, like the value of being connected to Fringe, the value of being connected to Musical Stage is a huge piece of a marketing strategy for us. So even if we're not going to be producing every single show with Bad Hats, having a young, agile, crafty, really well-respected company makes us younger, more agile, more sort of innovative in the eyes of potential audiences. And that can run through the kinds of communities that each of these companies is stewarding at the moment, we benefit by being associated on a broad brand level. I do think there's a huge data play that can happen in time. We're not there, and the legalities of it all and the technical aspects of it all are going to be complicated. One of the parts of our strategic plan is to use our data much more, and to make that data available even in aggregate in terms of how do we identify successful mechanisms for reaching our audiences, or what is the general demographic attending each of our shows, making that available to our partners. But I think that'll be in years 2 and 3. I don't know, Paul, maybe your timeline's faster.
Okay. We have two similar questions about envisioning this partnership growing. Do you see more friends coming into it, different friends? And also, you touched on briefly providing space and support to the theater community at large. So how do you see this growing? Or not yet?
I
You're
mean,
not ready for that yet.
I mean, the honest answer is that there will only be so much room at the inn. What in this first version of the agreement was important was a kind of an affection, but non-competitive aspect to the relationship. You know, each of us has a lane that we are known for and that we're in. And we had pre-existing relationships across these companies that made it really make sense to be roommates. It's very different than a space that just turns over and turns over and turns over. And so, yes, everyone, you should all be getting together on every effort to make audiences grow, to make the role of the arts in building a healthier society known to a bigger community. Like, those are all things that we need to set aside our differences to achieve together. But I think that, you know, if we get up to 450 performances a year in this little venue, plus all of the community engagement activities we're doing, it'd be very hard to accommodate another partner. But in principle, there's no reason that we couldn't.
But, you know, Toronto is a big city. There is room for this kind of partnerships in another part of the city. You know, you've got the kind of distillery East End locked up, but the West End is open to several other companies coming together like this.
And Michael, you had brought up when we were coming together about this, the kind of risk of perception of a clique or a closed group. And I think that, you know, we thought a lot about it. And why isn't it everyone? I don't know if you wanted to add a thought to that.
I'm just trying to think back on, you know, it was like some of the various things that, you know, we broached and discussed. You know, it was like, there is, you know, it's human in the sense that there will be a degree of jealousy, or, you know, it was like to see this group of people working together and trying to collaborate and create something. And then there will be, you know, which I think is going to be the smaller part of it, but I think there is going to be the element of, why didn't I think of that before? Or why didn't I, you know, seek, like, you know, partners like these who would help me to sort of build, you know, on my strengths. And, you know, this is one of the things that I think is going to be trailblazing. It's going to set an example in the industry. It's going to, you know, open the, I think this whole thing of, you see how we coped with coming out of the pandemic. We all got in touch, started doing more co-productions and working together because the risk factor and this is just, you know, possibly another iteration of that, you know, and developing a stronger base so that we don't get shaken to the core, like, you know, with another pandemic. So we're looking to learn from the lessons that we have gone on before us and, come up with something even better.
Yeah. In terms of the group and that you characterized it as friends, I think also it's worth noting from your bios, Gideon and Michael, you're both on the TAPA board. Paul and Gideon have both worked for Tarragon. There's a lot of places where you've previously intersected. So this wasn't like, straight up competitors that had never worked together, that were coming together.
No,
Mhm.
no, it was a lot. I think, in the same way that the agreement itself is open and human, the coming together was very human. And these were relationships. Mumbi, who's the artistic director at Obsidian, is a graduate of the Soulpepper Academy, close friends with Wayne. I mean, it just like the lines of communication and relationship were very, very strong already. And the same I have to say we spent a lot of time thinking about Bad Hats they've been basically in residence at Soulpepper for 3 years, so we knew them well. I was the executive director at the Toronto Fringe Festival, and the astonishing leadership team there. It just made so much sense that we would connect and see what was possible. So yeah, that human connection is a vital part of it.
Yeah, a testament to community and connection in the community. So someone has a question: will this result in more theater productions in Toronto, or is it really an effort towards fewer productions that are better supported? Do you think there's going to be a net gain in terms of quantity or quality?
I think both. It was like the prime example that I cited earlier was that Obsidian couldn't have done Three Sisters on our own, but with Soulpepper we were able to do a production which saw a cast like I've never seen of Black theater artists on any one stage. I don't think it has ever happened before. The quality that was there, and it means that we can do more shows, and Soulpepper is not as brisk, so they can do more shows, so I think you will get quality and you'll get quantity. And it was like looking forward to collaborating with all the other partners. It was like I keep seeing, it was like, oh, maybe we should get into TYA. It was like and do a show with Bad Hats. It was like we did and have a great relationship with Musical Stage and would happily do another production with them. It was like going down the road. It was like, so yeah, I see the community benefiting by getting both. They're getting quality and quantity.
Yeah, I'd say Musical Stage is the same. We were set to do this season as a sort of a one musical season. We were set to do our new musical at the Tarragon, and then this relationship made A Strange Loop possible. So we sort of doubled our output thanks to this initiative.
The only other thing I'll add is because we can push further in terms of audience, it also allows us to add different modes of presentation, break out of that 3 weeks and done mode. One of the things that we're really focusing on is amortizing the cost of our productions over longer runs, which are, when it's just our audience pool, it's a lot harder to do. But if you know that you've got multiple pools, you've got connections from a communications point of view, you've got communities that are being brought to the show in different phases, you can run a show maybe 7 weeks, 8 weeks. And I'll remind everybody that the sole commercial producer in Toronto sells more tickets than every single nonprofit theater company in all of Canada on their own. And there is a big market out there that we need to take a piece of. And on our own, none of our companies could do that. So from a model of production, it's vital that we found new ways to extend runs, do more shows, have a different variety of shows, and I think this is a first step towards that.
Well, with that, I think we'll draw this conversation to a close. It was really lively and interesting. So a big thank you to our three panelists, Gideon Arthurs, Michael Sinclair, and Paul Beauchamp, for contributing this inside view of this case study. Really very useful. Many thanks also to Power Corporation of Canada, presenting partner of the Business and Arts Speaker Series. And as I mentioned at the top of the session, we announced the launch of the 2025 Arts Fest regional programs in 4 regions today. So if you are based in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, or Greater Sudbury, the call for applications is now open in those regions with a deadline of February 19th. Also, you can mark your calendars for the next speaker series session. It's going to be on February 26th, and it is going to be our next arts panel, the Arts Response Tracking Survey. We'll be sharing the latest marketing data with an exciting panel of guests, and there's a quite interesting through line, I think, in terms of topics from this discussion to the next one. So look forward to that. If you want to learn more about any of Business and Arts programs and events, please head to the Business and Arts website for more information or follow us on social media. Many thanks, and everybody have a wonderful day.